We are live. It's the Revved Up 906 podcast, a Detroit Pistons podcast to be exact. And I'm Hudson.
And I'm Ryan.
And before we get into this big alert podcast, I need to talk to you guys about a few quick things. First off, make sure to like and subscribe if you are new to the channel. And we have a big topic for you guys today, some breaking news. And so if you have any comments, takes, opinions, questions, make sure to comment below during this week's episode. And if you aren't so much into long form content, like 30 to 35-minute videos, make sure to click the link in the description below, because that link will shoot you to our Instagram, where you can watch weekly clips and opinions, takes, breaking news on our Instagram, because that might be a little bit more for you rather than our 30-minute episodes on YouTube. And in the coming out Friday, we have our draft evaluation, where we will be breaking down the predicted 5th and 6th pick in this year's NBA draft. So make sure to subscribe or turn on your post notifications button that looks like a bell on our YouTube profile, so you can be the first to know about everything that's going on with this year's draft and the predicted picks that are coming up very, very soon in this year's draft. Without further ado, Ryan, let's get into this week's episode. And breaking news as of this morning, the day we are recording, Monty Williams fired by the Detroit Pistons and Trajan Langdon. And here is the official report from Adrian Wojnarowski on the X platform. ESPN sources: after one season, the Detroit Pistons will dismiss coach Monty Williams, who leaves with 5 years and $65 million plus left on his deal. New president Trajan Langdon will move to make his own coaching hire this season. Holy crap, Ryan. Okay, so first off, we see Trajan make a lot of moves, right? He fires Troy Weaver within his first couple of days, and then within his first 2 weeks of his new position says goodbye, Monty Williams. And you know, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when we did our introductory episode talking about Langdon and giving some background info on him. And we were like, is it possible Monty gets fired? Yes. Do we see it coming? Not necessarily. Ryan, what are some of your first thoughts and reactions when Monty Williams just got fired a couple hours ago?
Well, I texted you. I'm sitting there. I got the text from you, and I'm like, I'll push that off a couple minutes. I got to wake up. And then I'm seeing like notification. I'm like, oh, I got to reread that. I don't know if that's 100% true. Then I open your text and I'm like, oh, it is true. Okay. My initial reaction is, and now that I love Monty Williams. I don't think he was necessarily the issue. He's a great coach. And you can flame me in the comments all you want for that comment alone. But I think Monty Williams is a great coach. He did a great job with the Pelicans in his time there in New Orleans. Did a great job with the Suns. And now I understand those were completely different rosters. The Pelicans had somewhat of a team, and then the Suns had a much, much better roster than the Pistons do right now. I understand that. It's a completely different situation from each stint. But he's still a good coach, and I don't think he was the biggest issue of them all. I think the biggest issue of them all is Tom Gores. I think that's the biggest issue, but that's neither here nor there. My initial reaction was, is this real? And then at the same time, I'm like, dang, that sucks for Monty. I feel bad for him. He just got fired last year by Phoenix and then comes to Detroit, hopefully for a restart, a little refresh, and then gets fired after 1 year. Obviously, the biggest takeaway of them all is the losing streak that we were on. That's going to be what Monty Williams is remembered for the most, is the fact that he was the coach in charge of the Pistons when we went on that historic losing streak. And that's not good. But I feel bad for Monty. He's not in a great situation. I will say, though, financially speaking, he is in a phenomenal situation.
I know.
Like the fact that he has 65 plus still owed to him. and it was an $80 million contract, 6 years into year one, gets fired. Obviously, great situation financially. He was already in a good situation financially, but now he's in a great, fantastic situation. And now I don't expect him to get hired right away, just because if you go off of him getting fired by the Suns last year, he made the comment, "Hey, I'm just gonna sit out of coaching for a year and really like tend to my wife who is battling cancer. Just spend time with family." And then Tom Gores is like, "No, no, no, don't do that. You want to coach." And then we're in the situation that we're in right now. But I don't think he gets hired right away. If he does get hired right away, the job that I see him going to is the Lakers, just
Right.
because the Lakers want a high pedigree head coach, someone who's highly respected around the league and can get the most out of his players. And I will say some people are going to go and say, well, Monty Williams didn't get the most out of his players here in Detroit. That's not necessarily the case. We were just young, inexperienced, and Weaver did a terrible job throwing this roster together because, case in point, how many moves that Weaver made at the deadline,
Right.
to acquire new guys and bring new talent in. So obviously the roster wasn't built to where it should have been. There were multiple people at fault, not just one guy in particular, but it's a rough scene in Detroit right now. Obviously, some people are ecstatic because we just got Monty out, we got Weaver out, but where that same excitement was there when we first hired those two guys. When we hired Weaver, everybody was ecstatic. It seemed like, oh, this is promising. He's been on a long line of good GMs. And just the fact of how many he's worked with, most notably Sam Presti in Oklahoma City. And then Monty Williams, everybody was ecstatic. We were ecstatic when we got that hire, after sitting through the process of going through guys like Chris Quinn, and I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. But there's a couple others. Chris Quinn, Kenny Atkinson was brought up a little smidge at times.
Yeah.
And then I can't even
Coach.
think.
Vanilla coach I thought his last name was Wright.
Jay Wright was not actually talked about.
Oh.
It was I can't think. Former UConn coach, not Dan Hurley, obviously, but former UConn coach got fired there. I can't even think of his name. Can't even think of his name. Anyways, the point is, like everybody was ecstatic when we got Monty. And then as soon as that losing streak happens, everybody's like, get him out. We don't want him here. So I'll just just one little tidbit there is just you can't have that excitement to get a new coach or a new guy in town. And these guys aren't bad. Obviously, Weaver did not do a good job, but Monty Williams is not a bad coach. Don't let what happened in Detroit change your perspective on him. He is not a bad coach. He's a good coach. He just had a terrible time here in Detroit. Bad things happen to good people. But that was my initial reaction.
Well, and what's interesting to me is you mentioned the right before the trade deadline moves that Troy Weaver made, and they were kind of out of nowhere, kind of got guys that weren't necessarily game changers, and that wasn't really what the Detroit Pistons needed. And when those trades happened, Monty Williams didn't have too much to say about those trades. So what I think is interesting is Monty Williams wasn't even able to make that great of relationships with those players, only having around 30 games with them. And so why I think this move of firing Monty isn't horrible is just because he was going to have to make relationships with those 5 to 6 players anyway. And we saw how bad of results he got. Maybe bring in a new guy with a fresh start with those, players that have been around 2 to 4 years, and with those new players that we brought in at the trade deadline. That's one point to make where it gives it a little bit of a case to mean like, okay, maybe just start fresh with a new guy wholly. But when you look at the Detroit Pistons organization as a business, it financially doesn't make much sense to just leave $65,000 on the table just to be paying out monthly or over years to Monty Williams. And it just kind of hurts me a little bit just knowing that we have one budget of $65,000 to a guy that won't even be working for the Detroit Pistons organization. So for me, that hurts my gut a little bit just because it's like, that's just not a good business move overall. Now, I understand, we have to do something after a horrible season like we had. It's just a hard thing to bite. But we're going to read this article from yahoosports.com. And this article mentions how it was actually Tom Gore's final decision to make that cut. And I think that's a little bit interesting because I think everyone's first assumptions is, well, Langdon had it out for Monty or he wanted this fresh start in his new regime. And we're going to get a couple of quotes here from Tom Gore's. Yahoo Sports starts Tom Gore's quote as saying, "Decisions like these are difficult to make. And I want to thank Monty for his hard work and dedication." The quote continues to say, "Coaching has many dynamic challenges that emerge during a season, and Monty always handled those with grace. However, after reviewing our performance carefully and assessing our current position as an organization, we will chart a new course moving forward." And then he goes on to say, I sincerely wish him and his family a very best. And it's just kind of interesting. Monty's had a rough couple of years, and I don't think it came down to disliking Monty personally or that he was necessarily a sore to the organization. I don't think it has anything to do with that. It just is solely based on performance of last season. And I think we gave Monty Williams that much money because we saw what he was able to do and build with the Phoenix Suns. And we saw no shines of that really at all last season. I mean, obviously Cade gave us a healthy season, but that didn't have anything to do with what Monty did. And it was just a tough decision to make, Ryan. It still kind of shocks me.
Yeah, to me, when I realized that it was Tom Gores that supposedly made that decision, I sat there and I don't want to be mean, but I'm like, you idiot. Like you're the one that went out to go hire Monty Williams. It wasn't Weaver that sat there, "Oh yeah, I want Monty Williams as my head coach. I'm going to go out and get him." It was Tom Gores that insisted, "Hey, let's go get Monty. This is the right guy for our franchise." And then literally not even a full year later, he's sitting here going like, "Yeah, he wasn't the right guy for the team. I don't see us winning anytime soon with him along this roster. He wasn't in a good position to win." And I'm like, dude, you just went out and got Monty Williams last year. You're the one that made that hiring. You sat down with him. You flew to him, sat down with him, had multiple conversations like, "Hey, I really want you here. You're the next cornerstone coach for this franchise." And then now you're sitting here going like, he just wasn't the right fit. I don't know what else to say. And I'm sitting there going like, dude, that irks me a little bit because it proves the point that it isn't actually anything to do with the build between the front office to the players. It has all the issues reside with the owner. It's Tom Gores. Tom Gores is the issue. Until he gets rid of the team, I don't know if we're going to win anytime soon. And I know I said that last year, and I'm going to say it again this year because this proves the point exactly. He went out and made this business decision, paid him $65 million, well, $80 million, owes him $65 million after a single season, pretty much saying, "Hey, I want you. You are the guy." And then you come here a year later and you fire him immediately. And supposedly, if it is your decision, you showed that you had absolutely no trust in the dude at all, that you had no care in the world, that if one bad thing happens, oh, yep, you're gone. Like we were already in a bad situation as is. It's not like we were coming off a winning season, people. We were coming off a losing season. Then on top of that all, you go out, get Monty, which all of us fans Pistons fans unite. We were excited. We were ecstatic for this hiring of Monty Williams. And then fast forward to now, obviously a lot of them want him out the door. And what does Tom Gores do? Yep, you're gone. And it's crazy to me because we weren't coming off a winning season. Granted, we were significantly worse this year than we were last year, but like we were still bad no matter what. Nobody thought, oh, this is going to be a fantastic year. We're thinking, oh, play-in tournament with ease. We're thinking playoffs. Nobody was thinking that. So to write off a coach that fast after you're the one that went out, flew to him, sat down, had multiple conversations to hire him, and now a year later firing him. Tom Gores is the issue. We don't win until he's gone.
Yeah, and a point to prove that, and I've kind of always had an inkling that Tom Gores seems a little too involved. And I will say, as far as the hiring of Monty Williams, we know that Troy Weaver did a lot of recruiting for them. They had past time together with the Oklahoma City Thunder, and it was almost like Troy Weaver gave this huge sales pitch to Tom Gores on why we should go and get Monty. And at that time, it looked like a brilliant idea. But then I found an article from New York Times, and I'm not a big New York Times guy, but I was reading this article about this new decision of firing Monty Williams, and something interesting came out of it. And this is talking about Tom Gores' hands at work when trying to develop this front office for the Detroit Pistons. It goes on to say, while doing interviews during the hiring process for the role that Langdon landed, Gores told candidates they would have free reign to hire and fire whom they please, with money being no object, per team and league sources. And we have inside info of when we toured the Detroit Pistons facilities, how Tom Gores has no relation with caring about where his money goes and what is done with it. The quote continues to say, to keep his job going into the upcoming season, Williams had to be evaluated and essentially go through the interview process with Langdon. So it was almost like Williams had to show Langdon why he deserved this job and almost go through the hiring process once again. The quote continues to say, the expectation was that Williams would present a thorough plan as to how he could improve the Pistons on the court, according to the team and league sources. Williams would not only have to convince the new president of his path forward, but then those two would have to convince Gores together. Additionally, those involved with the decision to retain or move on from Williams wanted to know for certain if he was truly committed to coaching a team in a rebuilding situation. Team sources said that the organization had been on the hunt for complete synergy from top to down this offseason. So it kind of seems like there was a disconnect between Monty Williams and the organization, and especially between Langdon and Williams. And when the Pistons hired Langdon as president, I didn't necessarily think that way. I didn't know that Williams would necessarily have to vouch for his job once again. And Monty Williams doesn't seem like the guy that wants to convince people why he's important, why he's a resource. He seems like a very laid back guy that, like, you guys do what you got to do, what you think is best. I'm going to sit here with my fat paycheck, know what I'm capable of with my resume. And Troy just doesn't, Monty rather, doesn't seem like a guy to me that's going to lay out this big proposal of why you have to keep me. He just seems like the kind of guy that knows his importance, and you should know too. Ryan, when getting some of that info, what are some of your thoughts on this article? Because it kind of gives an inside look at the relationships that were going on when Langdon was hired.
Well, first off, when anybody put in the position of Langdon gets the job, obviously they want their own people in there. Not that there was a big disconnect already between the two. They actually have past experiences together in New Orleans, briefly, but they did cross paths there. But overall, like, okay, I understand Williams needs to vouch for his job still because he just came off a terrible season and a historic losing streak season. And then on top of that, like there was a lot of turnover within the players. A lot of trades happened because of Weaver's hand. What did Monty Williams do to get the most out of his guys? And in that situation, I will say Williams is the type of coach where it's like, hey, I look at what I've done with Phoenix, look at what I've done with the Pelicans. I'm a good coach. That's all. That's all there needs to be said. Is I'm a good coach. I deserve this job. Monty Williams is that kind of coach. I don't see him laying out, oh, this is my 10-year plan from year 5 to year 10, what it's going to look like going down the road. He's definitely one of those coaches that I see as very analytical. But again, I wasn't there with the process of him pleading for his job. I wasn't there when he was first getting hired. I don't know him personally, but I do know that he is a good coach and that he shouldn't be in a situation where he has to beg and plead for his job. But this, like, when I saw that Tom Gores was like, new president can have full reign of the franchise, can hire or fire whoever they want, and I'm like, wait a minute. So you're contradicting yourself. Last year, you went out yourself to go get Monty Williams.
Yep.
You went out to go get Troy Weaver. And now you're sitting here after, well, granted, Weaver, it was his time. But with Monty, just literally 1 year into his deal, you're sitting there going, yeah, Monty, just so you know, I have absolutely no confidence in you whatsoever. So whoever comes in to fill this role, most likely you're gone. That's what I saw that as. I'm sitting there going, like, you've got to be kidding me right now. Like, again, you went out to go get him, and now he's gone. So I don't know what I wish I could have been there for that process to really see what Tom Gore's reaction to this all was. Because again, I really think he is the issue because there's no reason why we should have this much turnover within a franchise consistently year in, year out. Now, I will say, look at the Lakers as an example, because they haven't had a long-term head coach in 10 years, because the last long-term head coach was Phil Jackson. Ever since Phil Jackson, the past 10 years, no coach has lasted longer than 3 years at the helm of that job. And that's a different situation. You look at their roster, it's built to win a championship. I don't think it is, but some people think it is, especially when you have LeBron on the roster, you have Anthony Davis on the roster. Everybody's like, oh, yeah, that team is championship or bust. The Lakers think that. They think it's championship or bust. So that's why they're going out going, yeah, Darvin you're not good enough. You had a winning record under us, but you're just not the coach we want to win this next championship with. And then, so now you look at the Pistons in this situation. We should not be in the same situation as the Los Angeles Lakers right now. We should have a long-term head coach that sits with us through this rebuild, and we're not having multiple turnover here and there. Like, we hired Dwayne Casey. At that time, we were going, okay, first 2 years with Casey, we're going to try and compete for the playoffs. And let's see what happens. And then all of a sudden, after the first year of doing that, they're like, all of a sudden, yeah, let's go into a rebuild. And they go into a rebuild. And Dwayne Casey was initially brought there to win games and make the playoffs. And now all of a sudden, Casey's having to rebuild an organization and set a blueprint for what's to come. And then he gets let go. Weaver comes in, not Weaver comes in, but Monty Williams comes in as the next head coach. And everybody's going like, oh, this rebuild's starting to go somewhere. And they were promoting, Tom Gores specifically was promoting, yeah, let's restore this team. And then we're sitting here now, multiple turnovers between like pretty much 3 head coaches within a span, because you had Van Gundy there too, not with this core group, but the same result is you had Van Gundy, then you went to Casey, now you're at Williams. 3 head coaches within a couple of years. and we should not be in the same situation as the Los Angeles Lakers. And I don't want to be ever in that situation in general, if as the Lakers are in right now, even with us winning. I don't want to be in that situation. You should not have to fire a coach for having a winning record. That should not be a thing. But that's neither here nor there. That's not the point. The point is, like, we should not have this much turnover with our front office down on our roster, with the last couple of years that we've had. And it all comes out of Tom Gores.
One thing about talking about the effect of Monty Williams that he had in just one season with the Detroit Pistons is, I think that behind the scenes, he was a very sound coach for the Pistons in a very laid back personality for this young team that is known for causing a ruckus at times and being very emotional. I think it was good to have a guy like Monty just because he's so even keel. But I will say, there were times, he got worked up at this during the season, especially during a losing streak. I just wonder where his heart was at, where his mind was at, just because there is so much going on in his personal life. He has young kids he's taking care of. And so I just don't know if he always had his heart in it during the season. I sometimes wonder if he just needs a team to coach like a Lakers that have vets, and that there's a little less chaos going on. And with some of the articles that are coming out, a lot of it's talking about how there's a lot of skepticism on whether he wanted to even coach a rebuild team. Because if we remember back to weeks before we hired Monty, there were quotes coming out and articles coming out about how he doesn't want to coach a rebuild team, how he wanted just to find an even keel team, like with full of vets that can just he can just be there as a voice of reason at times. I kind of want to talk about some quotes from X and kind of get fans' perspectives from all around the community, just so that we can get an inside look at what the community is talking about. Let's go to Go For It Radio on X. It says, in fairness to Monty Williams, the Pistons were not a good team, and he really didn't get a chance for anything. He got 1 year. A 3-year-old _ on Twitter says, oh, Monty Williams, the world's greatest underachiever, 30 years in the game and still can't win a championship. You're the shining example of zero potential reaching its fullest mediocrity capacity. A lot going on, a lot of different takes in the Pistons community. Just Sunny D on Twitter says to Woj ESPN, Monty Williams, year $20 million, buyout from the Suns, 78.5 deal with the Pistons, 65 million buyout. Coaching is wild these days. Success is getting older. I guess him getting older is what he means, but the paychecks sure aren't. It is kind of crazy how much we're seeing coaches get paid these days. We see a lot in the NFL how certain markets or positions go up and down in price. Like running back, certain years they're just getting paid crazy. Quarterbacks are getting paid crazy certain years. Sometimes there's down years. But the coaching era in the NBA is at an all-time high. Here's a quote from Keith Black Trudeau on X. Monty Williams is not a bad head coach, not at all. Would not surprise me if he bounced back in his next job. However, he did a very bad job last season. He did not have his heart in it, and it was just so obvious. I don't think they could have been taken seriously if he came back for the Detroit Pistons. This guy is a weird name on X. He says he share quotes Adrian Wojnarowski's report and says, shout out Tom Gores for taking this on the chin after Adrian Wojnarowski made a quote saying the decision to fire Monty Williams now was made on the ownership level, sources tell ESPN. That is one thing about Tom Gores is, he makes a lot of wild decisions, but he's got balls. He's just a ballsy owner. And a lot of times it does not go his way. That's why I think this upcoming season, there might be some sell the team chance again, like we saw last season, Because if this season goes badly, like it might not go well for Tom Gores, just because I think he's a too involved owner. I think you need to hire a guy like Trajan, maybe, and just let the team go for a couple years. Give Langdon 5 years to just do his thing, kind of go under the radar a little bit, show up at some home games, and just stay out of the way, Gores. Stay out of the way, because he, to me, has just been too involved in the last couple of years. What are your thoughts on that, Ryan?
No, I completely agree. I think he has been too involved. I think he's trying to play the hero card right now. Like he's the
Yeah.
Tom Gores, thank you for all that you've done for the Pistons. We're on a championship contending team. You're the sole reason why we're in this situation. Nobody's gonna say that, even if we were in that situation. Everybody would be thanking the GM, thanking the coach, thanking the team. They're not thanking Tom Gores. So I don't know why he's wanting to be the puppet master here with the Pistons and just stick his hand into a business that he doesn't even need to stick his hand into. The whole process, like I've mentioned time and time again, the whole process of going out and getting Troy Weaver, of getting Monty Williams, and that was your call. That wasn't anybody else's call. That was your call. And
Right.
then here we are in this situation where we're looking for a new head coach again. The GM job is vacant. I don't think we're going to be looking to hire anybody in that job, just because I think Langdon is wanting to do it himself and get his foot in the door, trying to build it from what he wants, and then maybe next year look to fill that role and go like, hey, you're coming up with me. This is what I want. This is where we're going, but you're gonna help me build this into the future. But Tom Gores is sticking his hand into places that it should not belong, and it is very frustrating to me, especially since obviously our last ownership not bad. We win championships. 04. We're good, and obviously Joe Dumars at the time made the poor decision to go out and get guys like Ben Gordon and Charlie V. Terrible, terrible. I don't even know why you're going out and getting them. But you go and jump the shark a little bit, trying and say like, oh, we have the championship roster. We have those guys to the mix. We're back in it. No, that is not the case at all, especially coming off of drafting Darko. Ooh. But he made a couple mistakes here and there. He had a great run, though. Couple mistakes. Then that leads into Van Gundy getting hired. And then you hire Van Gundy as not only the head coach, but also the GM. That was the first mistake right there, hiring him as both. And then he pretty much runs the franchise into the ground. And then Tom Gores goes out and gets Troy Weaver going like, yep, you're the next man up. And then here we are, look at in our situation, not great. Also goes out and gets Monty Williams. Look at where we are, not great. He sticks his hands into situations that he should not stick his hands into. Obviously, basketball operations, you should be sticking your hand into that situation to hire somebody for that role because that's your job. But it is not your job to go out and do every little A, B, and C with the roster. It's not your job. You hired people to do that job. Let them do their job. It's frustrating how he sticks his hand into certain situations that he doesn't need to. But I don't think there even is anything else to be said on that because pretty much the bottom line is we're frustrated. Just take a step back, Tom. Just be chill about the situation. Let it run its course. And obviously, if it runs its course into the ground, well, you can make a change then. But until that point comes, let's just sit back and just own the team.
One thing that's interesting, and I'm not sure if it's happened for a reason, I'm not exactly sure, but we want to be on the lookout if any Detroit Pistons players tweet, comment, quote about this firing of Monty Williams. Because if we remember back to when Dwayne Casey departed from the Detroit Pistons, a couple of guys commented on certain posts or tweeted or made quotes during the off season about, him parting ways. Well, no one's mentioned sadness or anything about Monty Williams getting fired. So that's why I want to kind of get an inside look, hopefully soon, about what the Pistons players think directly, because I would have thought we would have heard a tweet or something by now from anybody, but we haven't gotten anything. So that's why I don't really know where the Pistons as a roster, where the pulse is at of their thoughts on Monty Williams leaving and getting fired by the Detroit Pistons front office. That's just something that comes to mind because you always get something when something happens with the organization, with the front office. You always get a little bit of something, a peek inside from at least one player. So we kind of want to get an inside look at that, and hopefully something comes out soon. Ryan, when talking about Monty Williams getting fired by Langdon and Tom Gores earlier this morning, any final thoughts?
Well, with the players there and maybe not hearing anything, I think they're scared actually, because I don't think their jobs are secure right now. Obviously, Cade and Duran, 100% secure. Ivy is like, I would say 60% secure. I'm not giving him a full 100, just because this year, even though he did improve defensively, he wasn't still blow yourself out of the water offensively. But with that being said, I think a lot of the guys are scared because, first off, the guys that were put in charge to run this team just got fired. Weaver, within Langdon's first pretty much week on the job, fires him. Then 2 weeks on the job, obviously now we have Williams being gone and dismissed.
Right.
So I think a lot of them are sitting there going like, ooh, what's going on here? Should be getting ready to pack, or like what's going to happen? Because usually when you have a situation where you literally just cleaned house, the players are kind of on the hot seat a little bit too, because Weaver envisioned these guys to go somewhere, and Monty envisioned these guys alongside Weaver to go somewhere. And now those two guys who you entrust the most are gone, and you have no relationship at all with Langdon. The only relationship that like Cade Cunningham has, as an example, is his relationship with Tom Gores, presumably. But outside of that, like there's no connection at all within anywhere of the team,
Right.
outside of just like the athletic trainers, obviously, like people like that, staff wise, still have a relationship with the players, but they're not important. The important is the front office. So I think these guys are on a little bit of the scared side, just because they don't know what the future is going to look like for them with the organization. Because obviously, Ivy, as a key example, he wants to be a Piston. He wanted to be a Piston when he got drafted. He still wants to be a Piston today, and he wants to be a Piston for his entire career. But now that you have a new guy in town with Langdon, you don't know who's going to get hired as the new head coach. You don't know what your role is going to go with the team going forward. So I think just there's a lot of worriness within the team, just because they don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we were sitting here going like, chances of Weaver getting fired, not extremely high, but it could happen. Chances of Monty getting fired, not extremely high, but it could happen. And now that literally 2 weeks into Langdon firing both, now we're sitting here in a situation like, oh, what's going to happen? And I don't think it's just us fans. I think it's the players too.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions to be answered. And I said it right when the season ended. I said, buckle up, get ready, because a lot may happen this offseason. And the NBA finals just finished, and we've had our GM and our coach fired. So this is pretty wild. Also, shout out the Boston Celtics winning the 2024 NBA finals. We should have an episode just talking about the cringy Jason Tatum quotes. I don't know if you've seen that, Ryan, but him like trying to have all these epic quotes after the NBA finals is just hilarious. Him redoing the Kevin Garnett, we did it. I just think it's hilarious. But yeah, shout out the Boston Celtics. That will do it for episode number 33 of season 2. Make sure to comment below your thoughts, comments, questions, opinions on Monty Williams getting fired from the Detroit Pistons right around the NBA Finals. Oh, a lot to come and a lot to happen, but we will be along for the ride. And so hopefully you will be too. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.